People think full-time travel starts with buying a plane ticket, but by the time you buy the ticket, most of the work should already be done. For me, it started about a year earlier when I stopped treating travel like a dream and started planning for it. If you're wondering how people actually pull this off, I'm going to walk you through exactly what I did, step by step, so you can start building your own plan to be a full-time traveler. Now, some steps may not apply depending on your situation, so just take what's useful and skip what's not. Now, before any logistics, budgeting, or packing, there is one step that makes everything else possible. Deciding that you are actually going to do this. Not maybe, not someday, not just something that you daydream about when work is stressful, but a real decision. I am going to travel full time. Something shifts when it moves from a comforting daydream to a concrete plan. The question stops being should I and becomes how do I actually make this happen? And that shift is what unlocks all of the practical steps that will follow. Now, one thing that also helped me was telling a small number of people I trusted very early on. Just one or two people that I knew would be supportive and not immediately panic on my behalf. They became my sounding board while I figured things out, the people I could share progress with, and the ones who reminded me why I wanted this when the process felt overwhelming. Having that small support system made it much easier to keep moving forward instead of getting stuck in my own head. Now, keep that circle tight at first. Most people tend to react to big life changes with concern, not excitement. They care about you, but their brains go straight to the worst case scenarios. Safety, money, career, all the things that could go wrong. If you share too widely too early, you can end up carrying someone else's anxiety before you've even built your own confidence. Once you've made the decision and said it out loud to someone safe, the whole process becomes more tangible. You're no longer just imagining a different life, you're preparing for it. The first practical step is to figure out your timeline. You don't need an exact departure date yet, but you do need a planning window you can work backwards from. Without that, everything stays vague and it's very easy to drift for years. Start with the thing that most limits your flexibility, and for most people, that's housing. Things like leases, mortgages, and rent obligations all determine when you can leave without having to pay double for accommodation, breaking contracts, or just scrambling at the last minute. In my case, I made the decision right when my lease renewal came up. I wanted to leave as soon as it was realistically possible, but I also didn't want to rush and create chaos. So instead of signing for another full year, I negotiated a 9-month lease. That gave me a defined runway without locking me into anything long term. And that one decision started the clock. If you rent, look up your lease terms immediately. Find out how much notice is required and when your lease actually ends, not just the month. Also find out whether subletting is allowed and what penalties exist for breaking early. If your renewal is coming up but you're not ready to leave yet, you may be able to negotiate a shorter term. Landlords often agree to this for reliable tenants, especially if it avoids vacancy. Now, if your lease just renewed, your timeline may naturally be longer. And if you plan to sublet or find someone to take over your lease, make sure you give yourself more time than you think. Finding the right person, getting landlord approval, and coordinating timing can take a few months, and it's much easier to do that early than under pressure at the last minute. If you own your home, your timeline is going to depend on what you decide to do with the property. Selling, renting, or setting up property management all involve additional steps that can affect how quickly you're able to leave. Now, if housing isn't a limiting factor, use the next biggest constraint. Things like work commitments, family obligations, school schedules, or major events already on your calendar. The goal is to identify the earliest realistic window you could leave without creating avoidable problems. Think of it in terms of a target month. For example, August next year or March after my lease ends. That's what you'll use to time everything else. When to give notice at work, when to start selling or downsizing, and how quickly you need to move through each step. Here are some realistic ranges that work for most people. Just adjust them based on your situation. Selling household items, decluttering, and downsizing. Begin around 3 to 4 months before your move-out date. Doing this gradually prevents the last-minute panic purge where you end up underpricing items just to get them gone. Selling large items like furniture. About 1 to 2 months before your move-out date. This gives you time to find buyers without living in an empty space for months. Selling your vehicle. Plan for about 2 to 4 weeks before departure, depending on how you sell it. If you use something like Carvana or a dealership, it can happen very quickly. But if you're selling privately, give yourself more time so that you're not rushing or dropping the price at the last minute. Work notice. Typically 2 to 4 weeks before your departure date, but it could be longer for senior roles or contractual obligations. And if you want time off between quitting and departure, make sure to build that in too. Most people underestimate how much there is to do in the final stretch. And also remember that timelines vary widely. Some people leave within 3 to 6 months of making their decisions, and others take a year or more because of leases, finances, family needs, or career transitions. Neither approach is better. The right timeline is the one that lets you leave without blowing up your life in ways you'll regret later. When you place these date ranges on a calendar, something shifts. The plan stops living in your head and it turns into concrete steps spread out over time. Instead of feeling like one giant life change, it becomes a series of manageable actions. Now, the next major piece is building a financial foundation strong enough to support you once you leave. You can think of this in 3 parts: organizing what you already have, figuring out how long it will last, and then adding as much extra buffer as possible before you leave. Start by making sure your money is safe, accessible, and working for you while you plan. First, check where your savings are currently sitting. If a large amount is in a basic checking account, you are missing out on money it could be earning. Moving it to a high yield savings account lets it earn interest in the background while you prepare. I also recommend separating your money across multiple accounts with different roles for each. I keep the majority of my savings in a high yield account at a bank with the highest APY. That account holds the amount I want to come home with, plus part of my travel budget, and I don't log into it regularly, especially not on public Wi-Fi in cafes, hotels, or hostels. A second account holds the portion of my budget I actually use while I'm traveling. That's the one connected to my everyday spending and card payments. Then I keep a third account with just the minimum balance, strictly as an ATM backup. I almost closed that account before leaving, and I am so glad that I didn't. In Guatemala, my main ATM card suddenly stopped working, and I needed cash for housing and school, and that backup account ended up being the only way that I could access my money quickly. When you're abroad, things tend to fail more frequently. Cards get blocked, machines don't work, or banks flag transactions. Having your money spread out across multiple accounts makes sure that one problem doesn't lock you out of everything. That being said, make sure you also have more than one credit card. And check expiration dates on everything while you still have a stable address. If anything will expire within the next year, replace it early. I learned this the hard way. I ordered one of my backup cards too late and it arrived 3 days after I left the country. I had to retrieve it months later during the holidays. If something had gone wrong before then, I would have had very limited access to my own money. Access is also about your bank recognizing your activity. Some banks require travel notices and others don't, so just make sure to check your bank's policy before you leave. If they offer it, setting one reduces the chance of fraud alerts freezing your cards the first time you use them abroad. Even if your bank says it's not necessary, it's still worth confirming how they handle international transactions and what triggers a security block. While you're in your account settings, make sure your contact information is up to date. If they need to reach you about suspicious activity, you don't want alerts going to an old phone number or address. Two-factor authentication deserves special attention. Many financial accounts send verification codes by text. If those messages go to a number you won't have access to overseas, you can lock yourself out of critical accounts overnight. Before you leave, make sure your phone number will still work for receiving text. In a few minutes, I'll walk through exactly how I set that up and how affordable it is. Also, make sure that you can manage everything digitally. Install your banking apps, test that you can log in from your phone, and set up online bill payment for anything that will continue while you're away. Now, once your basic financial setup is in place, the next step is figuring out what your money actually needs to cover. Start by estimating your monthly travel budget. Make it a realistic one based on how you actually plan to travel. Moving frequently, flying often, visiting expensive countries, or packing in bucket list experiences will raise your costs significantly. Staying longer in each place, using public transportation, choosing homestays or hostels, or volunteering can stretch the same amount of money much further. For me, I planned about $3,000 per month, and I knew that was on the generous side for the type of travel I had in mind, but it gave me some breathing room. Some months ended up costing way less, which is extending how long I can stay out. Now, if you're unsure where to start, look up real prices in the places you're considering: housing, food, transportation, activities, and just build from there. Budgeting off actual numbers is far more useful than guessing. Next, account for the one-time cost of leaving. These are easy to overlook because they happen before the trip even starts, but they can add up fast. Think about anything you need to pay before you even arrive somewhere: flights, travel insurance, visas, vaccinations, any gear you need, deposits, or other fees. Also, if you're downsizing or relocating, add in those logistics too: shipping belongings, renting a van, hiring movers, storage units, packing supplies, extra baggage fees, or even gas for long drives can easily add up to thousands. This is one of the most underestimated categories. People focus so much for saving for travel and then watch a large chunk of their savings disappear before even getting out the door. Add those numbers into your budget early so there are no surprises. Also, decide how much money you want to come home to. Think about what would it cost to restart your life. Factor in a few months of those living expenses, things like housing deposits and basic bills while you get settled. Many people aim for 3 to 6 months of expenses. Whatever number feels safe to you, set that aside and don't include it in your travel budget. Now, once you have those pieces, you can estimate how long your savings can support you.
Take your total available savings, subtract your one-time departure costs and your return cushion, then divide what's left by your monthly travel budget.
That gives you a rough idea of how many months you can support yourself without income. Won't be exact, costs fluctuate and plans evolve. You may end up spending more or less than expected, but when you know roughly how long your money can last, you can make intentional choices instead of just guessing or hoping that everything will work out. And the final financial piece is building as much cushion as you reasonably can before you leave. Once you know roughly what you need, this next phase is about strengthening that number as much as possible. For me, that meant living very differently for a while. I basically became the most boring version of myself on purpose. I stopped going out and had friends over instead of meeting at bars or restaurants, cooked at home, ate leftovers, and stopped shopping just because something caught my eye. If I thought I needed something, I checked Goodwill first, but honestly, I was more focused on getting rid of things than bringing new ones in. I only took 2 short trips the entire year because everything else felt like it was pulling money away from the bigger goal. And what kept me motivated was remembering what the money is for. Every dollar I didn't spend now was time later, more days I could stay out in the world without rushing back to a job. It also helps to look for ways to bring in extra income that don't tie you down long term. Think flexible, temporary, or low commitment options that fit around your existing schedule. Seasonal work or short-term gigs like pet sitting, tutoring, babysitting, and freelancing. In my case, I ended up with one of the most random jobs imaginable, a mail scanning gig. I would collect physical mail, take photos of each piece, upload them, and get paid about $1 per item. It was completely mindless, and I could do it from my couch while watching TV, and over time it added up to a few extra $100. Not life-changing money, but still meaningful. That alone covered several days of travel later, and it required zero long-term commitment. One-time money sources can help too, things like new bank account bonuses, credit card points, tax refunds, or anything unexpected can go straight into your travel fund instead of disappearing into everyday spending. Another really powerful lever is lowering your fixed expenses, even temporarily. Housing is usually the biggest one. If you have any way to reduce or eliminate rent for a short period, like staying with family or taking on a roommate, downsizing, or even house sitting, it can dramatically accelerate your savings. I gave up my apartment about 6 weeks before my departure and stayed with my family while I was still working. That allowed me to save aggressively during the final stretch instead of watching my paycheck disappear into rent. I also did a few trusted house sitters gigs during that time. It gave me privacy and alone time while I was in between places, and the housing itself was free aside from the membership fee. Trusted House Sitters is a platform that connects homeowners with travelers who stay in their home for free in exchange for looking after their pets. It can be a surprisingly good option if you like animals and want a stable place to land temporarily. So if you're curious about that, I'll put a discount link in the description so you can look into it. This savings phase isn't glamorous, and it can feel pretty restrictive at times, but it has a clear endpoint, and it can make the difference between feeling anxious about money on the road and feeling stable enough to actually enjoy the experience. Another great way to build cushion before you leave is by selling and downsizing your belongings. Not only can this generate extra cash, but it reduces what you have to store or move, and it makes the actual departure much simpler. But it takes far longer than most people expect, so starting early matters. For me, it took months, but the simplest way to make this manageable is to sort and catalog everything you own into 4 clear paths: sell, store, donate, or throw away. Sell just means it's valuable enough to justify the effort. Store means you genuinely want it later and would be upset to lose it. Donate means it's usable but not worth your time to sell, and throwaway is self-explanatory. This sorting step keeps the process from being one giant emotional pile, and a simple tracking system helps way more than you'd expect. I created a handy spreadsheet for this. It's nothing fancy, but it kept everything from living in my head. It also made progress visible, which helps you stay motivated as you move through it. If you want the spreadsheet I used, I'll link it in the description. Once that's set up, start sorting with the easiest decisions: clothes you never wear or duplicate kitchen items, old decor, electronics collecting dust, or books you will never reread. Do not begin with sentimental items. Momentum matters in this stage. Early wins make it easier to tackle the harder decisions that come later. As you work through your belongings, be strategic about when you sell what. Start listing smaller items early. These things leave your home gradually without disrupting your daily life, and the money adds up faster than you'd expect. I made over $5,000 on Facebook Marketplace, and a surprising amount came from these small items I never thought anybody would buy. List more than you think will sell and let the market decide. I'd also recommend holding off on getting rid of major furniture until closer to departure. Selling your couch or mattress too early just makes everyday life uncomfortable, and living in an empty space for months will wear you down mentally. A good rule is to list large pieces about 1 to 2 months before you leave. That gives you enough time to find buyers without turning your space into an empty shell. Starting early also protects your negotiating position. When you have time, you can wait for reasonable offers. When you're 2 weeks from departure, you are much more likely to accept lower offers just to get things gone. If you want to turn what you own into extra travel funds quickly and without overwhelm, I have a full video on that process and I'll link it above. One more small but practical tip: Be cautious about listing items for free. Free posts often attract a flood of messages and a high rate of no-shows. I tried giving away an older mattress and was completely overwhelmed with responses from people who never even followed through. Listing it for just $25 filtered the serious buyers and saved a lot of time and stress. If your goal is purely to donate, a local charity pickup can be much easier. Once you've handled what's being sold or donated, the next step is figuring out where the things you're keeping will go. Do not default to renting a storage unit without thinking it through. Storage solves the immediate problem of where to put things, but it becomes an ongoing expense and a tether to your old life. Start by asking one honest question. Where am I realistically returning to, if anywhere? If you plan to come back to the same city, a nearby storage unit may make sense. If your future is uncertain or likely somewhere else, storing everything in your current location can create a costly problem later. In my case, I knew I wasn't going back to Oklahoma, so storing things there made no sense. I kept only what would fit in my Hyundai Elantra, drove it to Florida, and placed a few boxes in my brother's storage unit near family. Also, make sure you run the math before committing. Monthly fees don't feel huge at first, but over a year or two, they can equal or exceed the value of what's inside. Storage should be intentional, not just the path of least resistance. Another practical decision you'll have to make is what to do with your car if you have one. For some people, selling makes the most sense. It removes a major expense and puts cash back into your travel fund. In my case, I sold mine on Carvana because I wasn't sure when I'd be back and I didn't want to keep paying to store something sitting unused. Others choose to store it with family or in long-term parking if they know they'll need it when they return. If you still have a loan on your car, contact the lender early to understand the payoff process. Title transfers and paperwork can take time, so don't leave this for the last minute. Also, if the car is financed or will sit in storage, confirm any insurance requirements needed. Otherwise, make sure to cancel your car insurance once the vehicle is no longer yours. And one last practical tip, try not to do all of this at once. Small, consistent progress is far easier than last-minute marathons. You're not just planning a future life anymore, you're actively clearing space for it. But not everything you need to handle is visible. Next comes the administrative side, the stuff that isn't exciting but will absolutely ruin your trip if you ignore it. Starting with your passport. Check the expiration date now, like right now. No, seriously, pause this video and go check. Many countries require at least 6 months of validity beyond your entry date, and some require blank pages. I didn't realize how critical this was until I checked my own passport. The expiration date was fine, but I didn't have enough empty pages for some countries' requirements. I discovered this 6 weeks before departure and had to rush an expedited renewal. Then my payment had an issue and the application got mailed back to me. After I fixed it, I was freaking out and checking the mailbox obsessively every single day, unsure whether my trip was about to fall apart because of some paperwork. Don't just assume you're fine because the expiration date looks good. Make sure you meet both requirements while you still have time to fix it. Next, make digital copies of your most important documents before you leave. At minimum, save your passport photo page, your driver's license or ID, travel insurance details, emergency contacts, and your first reservation. Store them in a secure cloud folder and offline on your phone so you can access them without internet. I also recommend carrying a small paper set stored in a different part of your luggage separate from your valuables. Feels a bit old school, but if your wallet, phone, or computer gets lost or stolen, having those details immediately makes a difficult situation a lot easier to handle. Some places also still require paper copies for certain things. For example, in India, I needed a printed copy of my visa, so it's helpful to have them even if you rarely use them. Next, look at visas and entry requirements for your first destination. Even if you plan to stay flexible and figure things out as you go, you should at least understand the rules for where you're landing. Know how long you can legally stay, whether proof of onward travel is required, and if any visas need to be arranged in advance. These things don't always go the way you expect, so give yourself more time than you think you need. I had a friend who waited until the week before her trip to get a visa for India because it had been quick for her in the past. This time it was delayed and she ended up stuck on a layover in Georgia for 5 days waiting for it to come through. Some countries are very strict about entry conditions, and airline staff may check your documents before you even board. Being prepared helps you avoid stressful airport situations or worse, being denied entry after you've already traveled halfway around the world. Next, if you think you might drive or rent a scooter abroad, look into an international driving permit before you leave. It's a document that translates your license into a format that other countries recognize. Even if rental shops don't ask for it, police sometimes do. In places like Bali, I saw checkpoints where officers were stopping tourists and asking for it. It's inexpensive and it takes very little time to get while you're home. Even if you never end up using it, having one removes one more potential stress point. Another admin step is figuring out how your mail will be handled once you're gone. If you have someone you trust, this can be simple. You can just forward your mail to them temporarily or switch your address to theirs. In my case, my family is supportive, so I switched my official address to my parents' home. My mom keeps an eye on anything important and lets me know if something needs attention. If that's not an option, you can use a mail service like Traveling Mailbox. They give you a US address and scan your mail so you can access it online from anywhere. I'll include a link in the description with more info if you want to look into it. A P.O. box can also help in some cases, but it really only works if someone is checking it regularly. Otherwise, it just becomes another place that your mail sits and important things can get missed. Regardless of which option you choose, make sure to switch as many accounts as possible to paperless delivery. That reduces how much physical mail you have to deal with in the first place. The goal is simple. Nothing important should depend on you physically being there. Also, don't forget to cancel or pause anything you won't use while you're gone. Streaming services, apps, memberships, or subscription boxes. Also, check your bank statements so you don't end up missing something and end up paying for something for a year without realizing it. Now, one of the most important things to sort out before you leave is your phone. Your phone is your lifeline while you're traveling, so it is vital to make sure it will actually work before you leave. Start by deciding what you want to do with your primary phone number. If you cancel your plan entirely, you can lose access to text used for security verification, banking logins, and apps you'll rely on while traveling, like ride shares. Many services still rely on SMS codes, so keeping your number active, even in a minimal way, makes life much easier. I transferred my number to a low-cost carrier called Tello. The process is called porting, and it was super easy and quick. It just means keeping your same number and moving it to a new carrier. I'm on a bare bones plan with no data, unlimited text, and about 100 minutes of talk time, which costs about $6.42 a month. It's enough for verification texts and occasional calls and anything essential while I'm abroad. If you want to explore that option, I'll leave a link in the description. Next, you need to plan how you'll actually get data overseas. Most modern phones support eSIMs, which are digital SIM cards you download instead of physically swapping chips. They're faster, more convenient, and make it easy to get connected as soon as you arrive. No more hunting for airport kiosks or local SIM shops after a long travel day. I've used two services depending on the situation. Holofly when I needed unlimited data, and Airalo for smaller, more affordable data packages. I'll include links for both so you can compare. Also, make sure to confirm in advance your phone is unlocked, it supports eSIM technology, and you know how to install and activate. Another really important thing to think about is your health coverage. Health coverage is one of those things that's easy to ignore while you're planning, right up until the moment you need it. Before you leave, figure out exactly what happens to your current health insurance. If it's tied to your job, it will usually end after your employment does. And if you're on a private plan, you need to check whether it covers you internationally and for how long. Prescriptions are another piece people forget about. If you take a medication regularly, talk to your doctor before you leave. Ask about getting a larger supply or generic alternatives or documentation you can carry. Some medications aren't available in every country, and others require paperwork to bring it across borders. Beyond prescriptions, use the time before departure to catch up on routine healthcare while it's familiar and covered. Annual physicals, blood work, specialist visits, women's health screenings, skin checks, anything you've been putting off, schedule it now. Also, don't forget about dental and vision care. If you're due for a cleaning or dental work, or need new glasses or an updated contact lens prescription, take care of it before you go. Also, if you need vaccinations for the countries you'll be visiting, look into those early as well, because some require multiple doses spaced weeks apart. Finally, think about what coverage you'll have both during your travels and when you return. Travel medical insurance can protect you abroad, but many plans only apply while you're outside of your home country. If you come back unexpectedly or permanently, you could suddenly find yourself uninsured. Having a plan for that transition, whether it's COBRA, marketplace insurance, or another option, prevents a vulnerable gap during an already stressful time. Speaking of travel insurance, it is not just about lost luggage and flight delays. The most important piece is medical coverage, especially evacuation. In some parts of the world, the nearest adequate hospital may not be nearby, and medical evacuation can cost tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is not something you want to self-fund. Look for a policy that covers emergency medical treatment abroad, hospitalization, and medical evacuation, with coverage limits high enough to matter, and includes the countries you plan to visit and the activities you plan to do. If you're planning on skydiving, scuba diving, riding scooters, or anything even remotely adventurous, make sure that those activities are not excluded. Many policies exclude risky activities in the fine print unless you add a rider. Also, check duration limits. Some plans only cover trips up to a certain amount of days, while others are designed for more long-term travelers and can be renewed as you go. I chose a policy designed for extended travel rather than a standard vacation plan. It gives me flexibility to stay abroad longer without constantly restarting coverage, and it includes evacuation, which for me was a non-negotiable. So with those protections in place, the next step is planning your exit from work. Leaving your job isn't just about picking a last day. It's about timing your exit so you maximize income and your benefits during the transition. Start by understanding exactly what you're walking away from. Check your company policies for things like unused vacation payout, bonuses, vesting schedules, retirement contributions, stock grants, or commissions that might hit at a certain date. Sometimes even waiting a few extra weeks can mean a significant difference in what you leave with. You also need to decide whether you want a buffer between quitting and when you actually start traveling. Most people underestimate how chaotic the final weeks are, and it's a lot to do while working full-time. Whether you need time off before departure really depends heavily on your job. Some roles ramp up at the end, and others get quieter once you've given notice. I actually worked until the Friday before I left on Sunday because I knew I could coast during those final weeks. If your role is demanding, high-stress, or unpredictable, building in a buffer of 1 to 2 weeks can make a huge difference. Next, think about how you want to give notice. 2 weeks is standard in most industries, but your situation may differ. If you hold a senior role, manage big projects, or just want to preserve strong relationships, a longer notice period can be appropriate. On the other hand, if you're in an environment where people are walked out immediately after resigning, you may choose to keep things tighter. There's no universally correct approach, just be strategic and honest about the culture of your workplace. Now, before you announce anything, quietly prepare. Download personal files from your work devices that you're allowed to keep. Save copies of performance reviews or any important contacts or documentation that may be useful later. Also, don't forget to remove personal information from company systems. Once you give notice, access can change quickly. You should also think through how you're leaving, not just when. Plan your knowledge transfer. I found it really helpful to create a simple handoff document that explained my key responsibilities, any important timelines, where anything lives, and the current status of my projects. This protects not only your reputation and makes the transition easier for people staying behind, but it also prevents the last weeks from turning into a constant stream of emergency questions after you've already mentally checked out. Finally, tie up the administrative loose ends. Make sure to update your personal email and mailing address for payroll and tax documents, and confirm how you'll receive your final paycheck, and save HR contact information for any future questions. Now, once your work responsibilities are wrapped up, there's one more adjustment to expect. Leaving your life behind isn't just a logistical process. It's an emotional one too. Even if you're thrilled about what's ahead, leaving your life behind can feel heavier than you expect. You're stepping away from routines, familiar places, relationships, and the version of yourself that existed in that environment. It can feel strange at first, and guilt can show up too. Guilt about leaving behind people you care about, responsibilities you held, or the sense that you should stay because others want you to. It is possible to feel relief, excitement, fear, guilt, and sadness all at the same time. Loneliness is another thing to expect, especially early on. When you arrive somewhere new, you don't automatically have community or favorite places or even a sense of belonging yet. You have to build that from scratch. Some days will feel incredible and others will feel strangely empty or disorienting. Travel is not constant excitement, it's real life in a different location. My last piece of advice is come back to your why often. Remind yourself, why did you want to do this? Write it down somewhere or save it on your phone. Just keep a note you can reread when things feel hard, because at some point they will. When you remember why you chose this and what you're moving toward, it helps you push through the uncomfortable parts instead of assuming you made a mistake. The emotional side doesn't go away, but you get better at navigating it.
And over time, what feels unfamiliar starts to feel like your new normal as a full-time traveler.
Now that you have your roadmap, the next step is actually starting. A full-time travel lifestyle is built step by people who decide they're not going to wait forever. If you're serious about this path, make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm sharing 22 full-time travel tips you'll wish you knew before you started. The kinds of things people usually learn the hard way after they're already on the road. Thanks so much for watching.